We back. Another fresh and hot episode of the latest edition of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast is ready to roll. Happy Tuesday, everybody. Our NHL-wide breakdown of every single team and all of the fantasy angles that you need to know rolls into the Seattle Kraken. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the lab to the latest episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. You know what it is. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We couldn't be doing our show without all of y'all. So thank you so much. Make sure you smash that subscribe button. Drop us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to your favorite content. Still, I'm going to try and spit out these words. Man, it's been a long week for both of us already, and we're only at Tuesday. However, we're here every single day all summer long. We're breaking down every single team in the NHL right now. We already did the Dallas Stars. We did the Montreal Canadiens. Tap into the channel for all the latest. Top 5 players, breakout candidates, players to avoid, what's going on in general with all these teams. We'll be here all summer long, Monday through Friday. We're on to the Seattle Kraken steal. But before we get there, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs are cooked, sports still rolls on, and FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost and a daily bonus. That's right. There's something for everyone every single day all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Here we go, Steele. Seattle Kraken. It's very interesting now because you and I are going to be rotating through teams, how certain situations seem very different from others. We talked about the Habs yesterday, a lot of promising young players. The direction feels like the needle's pointed in the right way. The Seattle Kraken, a lot of promise only 2 years ago, making deep noise in the postseason. Matty Beniers wins the Calder. Then things have started to go off the rails a bit. And I know we're going to talk about our top 5 list, which obviously both of their big offseason additions are going into that top 5, I would assume. What do you think, though? And if you're okay, let's start here with the Kraken. Chandler Stephenson, Brandon Montour. What are your thoughts on these additions, and what do they mean for you first and foremost to the Kraken? Because I think we're going to be talking about their fantasy value in a hot minute anyway.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about all fantasy value with this team, but starting off with those 2 new additions to the organization of Brandon Montour, Chandler Stephenson. I think Brandon Montour is the more interesting name when it comes to fantasy value right now. Chandler Stephenson, he had a lot of opportunity with the Vegas Golden Knights. I think he got way overpaid on the Seattle Kraken contract right now. And this is, again, a guy, Chandler Stephenson, coming to a new organization right now. And you're a little bit worried about what he brings offensively because he had so much opportunity with the Vegas Golden Knights. And I'm bringing up his stats right now.
I got him
for Chandler Stephenson. But this guy only had 16 goals, 35 assists last year. Again, that's pretty decent for Chandler Stephenson. But the peripherals, when you talk about fantasy value, are nothing to be impressed about. 97 shots on net, 43 hits, 40 blocks. He's not a guy who you're going to get a lot of peripheral stats from. He's not a guy that's going to get a lot of power play points. He's not a guy that's going to be bringing the offensive production on a nightly basis. So for me, Chandler Stephenson actually doesn't make the top 5 as of right now. Brandon Montour does because of what he brings fantasy value-wise and what he has the potential of doing. Look, he had one good season with the Florida Panthers, a breakout season of 73 points just 2 years ago, played a full 80 games, 107 penalty minutes. He was a banger league beauty, 93 blocks, 92 hits, 242 shots. But then he fell from the heavens. He fell from the graces and back down to a Brandon Montour that we've known for a very long time in the NHL. He went from 73 to 33 points. He did only play 66 games, but that is a tremendous downfall for Brandon Montour, who had a spectacular season with the Florida Panthers. Again, some of the peripheral stats went from 242 shots to 168. 67 blocks only, 104 hits. So the hits got up just a little bit, but the penalty minutes went from 107 to 47. This guy fell from the graces in a year's time. So I think we can see a little bit of a balance between what we saw 2 years ago and what we saw last season with Brandon Montour. That's why he's going to crack the top 5, probably at that 5 position. Again, we're going to get down to the list very soon. I think you and I can both agree at number 1 on this top 5 fantasy list for the Seattle Kraken, it's Jared McCann. I think Jared McCann has to be the number 1 guy. I think everyone out there would obviously agree with us as well. With Jared McCann being that number 1 guy, because he leads the Seattle Kraken in their history right now. He has the points in the season. He has the most goals in the season. Look, very small history for the Seattle Kraken, but he still leads them.
Good seasons, nevertheless.
Yeah, and he led them last year again with 62 points in 80 games. The year prior, he had 70 points in 79 games. So I think it's a clear-cut number 1. Jared McCann comes in at first for fantasy value of the Seattle Kraken.
To circle back very quickly to Chandler Stephenson and Brandon Montour. Brandon Montour is the odd man out in Florida. Sam Reinhart was going to get a bag. Brandon Montour, obviously, just not enough room for him. Fantasy-wise and on the ice-wise, Steele, this is another perfect example of where I have to separate things, because I actually think Chandler Stephenson and Brandon Montour coming into the Seattle Kraken are going to do really good things for this team on the ice in terms of turning them into a much more complete
I agree with that
squad to be able to win games each and every night. Is Chandler Stephenson going to be able to replicate the good seasons that he's had in Vegas? 64 points, 65 points. Then last year, obviously, a down 51 for the money as well, Steele. I'm not liking any of those angles. However, he still comes in and brings quality to the overall squad. And I mean, I don't like those angles for the fantasy side of things. So just to circle off those 2 players super quick, I actually like them for the Seattle Kraken because they do make them a better, more balanced team for sure. Fantasy-wise, though, I agree with Brandon Montour at number 5 because I do think, actually, you know what, Steele? This one was so in flux for me. He could be 4 or 5, but he makes the list for sure because he is also going to eat just as much ice time, if not more, playing for the Seattle Kraken team. And I know he averaged 23 and 24 minutes over the last couple of years. And when you see a player with that big stepping out season, and he hasn't been able to do that before in his career or last year, I know he was a bit banged up, that's a concern too. I swear I'm going to circle back and finish this all off nicely. Number 1, Jared McCann for sure. And that's all I needed to say. We'll get to break. We'll talk about a few more other players. I got a breakout candidate. It might be more of a deep cut. Got a little bit more of the Kraken to talk about. Jared McCann put up a 40-piece only 2 seasons ago. Last year, in a quote-unquote down year, he still could have easily had 30 or more. This guy doesn't do it for the peripheral steal, but this might be the kind of sneaky fantasy ad for your offense that you're going to get at a good price, a very good round, especially because how the Kraken have had their little down spurt. We won't have ours around the break. We'll continue to talk about the top fantasy pieces on the Seattle Kraken and what's cooking with the Seattle team headed into the upcoming season. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. Sports don't stop, no matter what time of year it is. And that's why FanDuel Sportsbook has you covered, hooking up customers all summer long with a daily bonus. That's right. Something for everyone every day all summer long. Head to FanDuel.com. Start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. We appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Today's YouTube channel. You can also find them on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. The team that we're talking about on today's episode, the Seattle Kraken, their top fantasy value, best players that you can draft going into next season. Just to throw that out there once again, this is based on categorical leagues right now. Top 5 players going into next season for categorical leagues. That's the format we're getting it based off of. And that's the format we like to play as well. with categorical leagues on this podcast. So that's what we're going based off of on that format. I've got a number 2, a clear-cut number 2, actually, in my opinion.
Me too.
But I'll wait for you. I want to hear who you have at number 2, just so I can maybe poke a little fun at you just to see what you say. But no, I'm kidding. Who do you have? Who do you have at number 2?
For me, considering all angles here and how I really don't know what's going to go on with this team still after Jared McCann, I don't think either of us can really get too heated about who goes where, because there are so many question marks for this Seattle team. But if you and I were to do this 1 year ago today, after the 2022-2023 season, after the season Vince Dunn had, I think he could have been arguably, other than 40 goals for Jared McCann, could have been right there at the top of the list. Goalie, defensemen don't come around very often that can put up 115 hits, 80-plus block shots, and 64 points. I know last was a down year across the board for Vince Dunn, but where was it not on the Seattle Kraken? So yes, it's Vince Dunn at number 2 still. I have had this player in fantasy. I've had him in my keeper dynasty. I really like his game. You would think Montour in, Chandler Stephenson in, hopefully, potentially a little bit better of a season from Grubauer. We saw Joey Decord do his thing. We have new coaching blood, Dan Bilesma. We got, they made the first woman hiring in NHL history in Coach Campbell. I think it's Vince Dunn. Who you poking fun at, though, because I don't know, honestly, who else could go there after McCann. It could be a whole bunch of people, I guess.
Yeah, maybe there isn't a clear-cut number 2. That should be a clear-cut number 2. But some interchangeable guys that could go from 2, 3, and 4. But for me, I actually have Eeli Tolvanen at number 2. And I think he's going to get a lot of opportunity. And don't grimace just yet, Flip. Okay. But this is a player that has taken a step out in his NHL career since being acquired by the Seattle Kraken from the Nashville Predators. Played a full 81, missed 1 game last year. 81 games last year, 16 goals, 41 points for a career high, 24 penalty minutes. You know me, I love the peripheral stats. 210 hits, 75 blocks, and 153 hits. And he continues to get opportunity, and he continues to get time on the power play, hopefully going into next season. It looks like he will be on that first power play unit. And I also think this is a guy that can crack the top 6 forward group right now. You have injury concerns with Jaden Schwartz. You have injury concerns with Andre Burakovsky. And this is a team that needs some help offensively right now. And again, at 24 years of age for Eeli Tolvanen, 25 years of age for Eeli Tolvanen, continues to get opportunity, continues to get more ice time. Look, he had 41 points last year, like I said, but he's only getting 15 and a half minutes of average ice time. I think his ice time gets more and more as the year goes on. I really like his production and the potential offensively. And again, you know me with the peripherals. I think he's going to be a breakout player offensively for the Seattle team. He has 25, 30 goal potential in his system right now at such a young age.
This is a deep cut for me, Steele, and I do like a lot about what Eeli Tolvanen brings to the table. I guess looking back at his career, and maybe he hasn't been given the proper opportunity to really crack a top 6, no pun intended. I don't know. This one's so hard for me. I honestly don't come on this show very often, and I'm a little bit speechless in terms of not your choice of Tolvanen, just of what this roster makeup means for fantasy GMs. And maybe that's the main takeaway here in general, is be very, very wary of every player that you're drafting here. Is there still going to be value? For sure. But the Seattle Kraken, given all of the things we've already talked about, their poor performance last season being the biggest indicator, but new coaches, a whole new system, all of these things translate into me having very serious safety gloves on here with this situation. However, that many hits, that many block shots, it's definitely intriguing. Don't get me wrong, Steele. But, yeah. Anyway, I'll throw this out there for you because Jared McCann was 1 for me. Vince Dunn was 2. Can I confirm here? You have Eeli Tolvanen as the second most valuable fantasy piece on this team?
Going into next year, yes, 100%.
Okay.
I think he's going to be a breakout player.
Oh, no, I like
I'm
it. No,
going with
I'm
potential.
not like, I wasn't teeing it up to rip into you. I was just making sure that was your number 2 because look, I had Montour at 5. I'm just going to go in reverse because I'm all over the map here. I had Montour at 5. We'll talk about it if you want. At 4, I actually have Adam Larson, and this is probably where you're going to get mad at me because Adam Larson, obviously 18 points. It doesn't jump off the page. But if you want to buy into your peripheral value kind of argument, 162 hits, 151 block shots, 130 shots on net, 55 penalty minutes, and yeah, 18 points doesn't jump off the table, Steele. But for me, I can bank on Adam Larson. Adam Larson has triple-digit block shots and hits for the last 10 seasons consecutive. So when it comes to banger leagues, when it comes to balancing out your team, perhaps your last defensive choice for your starting lineup, Adam Larson is going to round it out in categorical leagues in a very, very big way, Steele. So I know I'm going all over the place here, but I got Montour 5, Larson 4, and I would agree with you at McCann at 1, but after that, we're all over the map here, but giddy up.
A little bit over the map. Again, Adam Larson, he's a fine defenseman. I can't believe you have 3 defensemen on this top 5 fantasy
Steele,
list.
this
For the
team
Seattle
is
Kraken.
confusing. I don't even know what to say here.
It is confusing. It is very confusing, but I'm looking at just the stats from last year. And look, I love the peripheral stats from Adam Larson, but he's also missing the offensive production. 18 points is not going to cut it for me. I don't just look at the peripheral stats. I also look at the point production as a whole in itself.
Yeah.
And that's why I have Ellie Tolvanen at number 2, because he's
Bjorkstrand had a good
potential.
year. Eberle brings some offensive value. I don't even think that that's the kind of players that this team, they have too many of the same kind of forwards, in my opinion. However, let's just get to the rest of this list because I've got a couple of very interesting young players that I'm not ready to say it's breakout season time right now, but I got to show them love. I'm always trying to bring that keeper dynasty angle as well, Steele. We might be all over the map a little bit today, but we got some accurate points to hammer home here, and I'm excited to talk about the rest of the NHL the rest of this summer.
Yeah, we got so much to break down. Look, I just want to get to my number 3 player before we continue on this conversation. I got Jared McCann at number 1. I got Ellie Tolvanen at number 2. And like we said, a little bit of an interchangeable list, but I've got Vince Dunn at number 3, just for everything that you said about him and what he brings to the table on the blue line.
Good player.
It's going to be interesting what happens with Vince Dunn, also with Brandon Montour, because it could be Vince Dunn on the first power play unit. It could be Brandon Montour. Most likely will be Brandon Montour on that first power play unit because of what he can do offensively as well. And again, down year for Vince Dunn last season. Injury concerns last year. Only played 59 games, but still had 46 points. Again, the breakout year of 64 the year prior.
This team struggled to score last year, Steele.
He brings the penalty minutes. He brings the physicality with 115 points. Look, this was a team that when they in their inaugural season, they were down bad. They jumped up to 100 points and made the playoffs, and then they were down bad again after going into their 3rd season. That's why they bring in Dan Bylsma. They bring in Jessica Campbell as the assistant coach, the first ever woman full-time full assistant coach in the NHL. So they're changing things up right now. They've got some prospects that you're going to get to just in a little bit as well later in this episode. But there's things to like. There's things not to like. I think the one thing that I'm really questionable on and this is why I don't have a goaltender in my top 5 list, is because the one good season of Joey Decord, the aging of Philip Grubauer as well, the injury concern with Chris Drieger too. Look, there's a lot to like about Joey Decord, and that's the guy I would go to. That's the guy I would lean towards drafting, and I still think he's a fantasy value asset. He would be number 6 on my list, but just because of the one good season, again, kind of like what we saw with Jordan Binnington when he came into the NHL. I know he played good last year too, but that's what I'm feeling about the goaltenders. That's why I don't have a goaltender on my list right now. But Jared McCann 1, Ellie Tolvanen 2, and Vince Dunn at number 3 for me. We're going to continue this list right after the break. So much to continue. Prospects, a lot of young talent on this team. Maybe Shane Wright is a player to look out for. Maybe Flip mentions him coming after the break, but we'll get to all of that right now. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Continue to hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review. Flip and I appreciate all that love and support you show us Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning is when you can find our episodes. Flip, over to you, my friend. You had Jared McCann 1. You had Vince Dunn 2. Who comes in at number 3? Did you say number 3 yet?
I don't even know what I said anymore, so I'm just going to defer to your list because I think it's much better than mine, and I'm just going to provide a supporting role here. The 2 names that were written down first and the 2 names that hold the most water are Jared McCann and Vince Dunn. And when I then think about this team, Steele, if you're going to obviously look at the other names that we talked about, Montour and otherwise, I'm reading into this perhaps too much. This new coaching system, the new coaches that are going to be behind the bench, the Coachella Valley Firebirds were a really good squad in the AHL. And I think some of these kids like Riker Evans on the blue line might get a really good look. And I know he's a tiny guy, and I'm not saying draftable. I just wanted to throw out a couple of more under the radar names. And when I looked into it, his offensive upside and his skill, I think he had 8 points in his stint in the NHL last year. Let me just bring that up. 36 games, 9 points, 38 block shots, 62 hits. He showed in his little bit of time to me that he might be one of those kinds of players that sneaks in there and might be valuable on the keeper dynasty side of things down the road. I needed to bring that up. And the obvious one for a breakout, especially given the things that I just mentioned and kind of this flux in the forward group. No disrespect to Oliver Bjorkstrand. No disrespect to Jordan Eberle. Is Jordan Eberle even with this team anymore, Steele? This is how bad I am today. For some reason, I thought, no, he'll be back. But Jaden Schwartz, Andre Burakovsky, Yanni Gourde, all of these guys that actually you and I probably like a lot for those week-to-week flyers, their ability to actually bring some fantasy value, and they're good NHLers. There's far too many second and third line pieces in the mix in the top forward group for this team. A down year from Matty Beniers. I guess what I'm trying to spit out is Shane Wright might have a really good opportunity here to prove some haters wrong. I don't know what the season is going to hold, Steele, but Yanni Gourde and Chandler Stephenson obviously up the depth chart with this kid. But I have my eyes peeled on Shane Wright because I think a lot of bad things were said about this kid for no reason. I want to hear from Seattle Kraken fans. They'll know better than both you and I. I've got Shane Wright and, man, I'm butchering this, Riker Evans as 2 very sneaky, deeper formats. Keeper Dynasty, I got my eyes peeled on both of those kids.
We're talking deep down there for both those players.
So deep.
Look, Shane Wright has a lot of potential to be a star in this league. Again, maybe some attitude problems with the player,
perhaps,
and some struggles with
this episode is going to have some attitude problems if you don't reel us back into your top 5 list.
Okay, we're reeling it in.
Yeah,
we're reeling
you thought
it in.
You were going to have an issue. Obviously, it was mine.
We're back to the top 5.
Yeah, can you fix this list for me, please? Because
I'm fixing it for you. We're going with my list because it's the right list in my opinion.
Your list,
Jared McCann at number 1, Ellie Tolvanen at number 2, Vince Dunn at number 3. We both agree. Brandon Montour can be 4 or 5. I do have Oliver Bjorkstrand at number 4, though. This is a guy who's a 20-goal scorer in the NHL. He's decent on the power play, definitely a facilitator, had 17 power play assists last year with 8 power play goals. He had 59 points, a career high for Oliver Bjorkstrand, can also shoot the puck a lot. He has 3 straight seasons of 185-plus shots in the NHL. So I like the peripherals there. He could do a little bit more with some blocks and some hits, but that's not his game. Doesn't matter. The offensive production is there. The power play production is there. And I think, again, some adding of these pieces, like we said, Chandler Stephenson, maybe not a fantasy value player that you target right away, but he could be in deeper formats and later in the draft. I will say, however, with all 5 of those guys, Jared McCann, Vince Dunn, Oliver Bjorkstrand, Brandon Montour, you're most likely not drafting these guys until after the 8th round. That's how bad the Seattle Kraken team is right now with a fantasy value
At least in terms of talent and fantasy, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of talent and fantasy-wise, you're not drafting any of these players until after the 7th or 8th round, I would say. just based off of where they finished last year, based off of their production.
Depending on your format, we always got to say that so people
depending
don't
on the
get
format,
too heated.
exactly.
Also, shout out to McThunderstick. His 2 cents were for you and I to chill out on the filler, sum it up in 10 minutes. Listen, we're all about the chit chat here, Mr. McThunderstick 2374. We appreciate the feedback, but if you don't like the filler, well, we appreciate your feedback anyway. I'm not trying to get heated.
We'll leave it at that, Mr.
Bang.
Thunder. But that's the 5 list. Those are the prospects. I mean, there's a lot to like. With some of these players, not really. I'm trying to make it seem a lot better than it is, but this is one of those teams that you kind of just have to wait and see what they do.
Hard to put a finger on, I would say, as well.
Exactly. You have to wait and see what they do this upcoming season because they started bad in their first year. They make the playoffs the second year. They get down bad again in their third season. What's going to happen the fourth year? Do they finish in the first place in their division? Who knows? We don't know because, hey, I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying
we do know this.
What's happened?
We'll be back tomorrow, headed back out onto the Eastern Conference side of things, continuing our breakdown of every single team in the NHL.
Yes, we will. We're going to break down so much over the summer, over the offseason, every single team, all the players you need to know going into next season's draft. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode with Flip and I. Have a great day out there. Thank you so much again. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports Day's YouTube channel. You can also find it on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Make sure you go check it out. Subscribe to them. We appreciate all that love and support. Have a great day out there. Good luck with all your bets this summer, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.